Mainstream history is absolutely messed up, and it's messed up in a way that is staggering. And one of the reasons why mainstream history is so messed up is because we don't actually have any fantastic way of dating any of the events that mainstream historians currently say that we have dates for. So what I mean by that is right now, most people are not questioning the mainstream chronology. Right now, in the mainstream, we have a situation to where when you go and you read a textbook or you watch a documentary or whatever, you'll see all of these dates ascribed to a culture, a civilization, an event, or whatever, right? And you've got the whole AD BC situation, or, the whole CE BCE situation. It doesn't matter, whichever. The main point is that when we go right now and we start studying history, there's an entire dating system already set up for us, and most of the dates that have been set up for us are essentially locked in stone. When you go and you start studying history, and it doesn't matter what history you start studying, it doesn't matter if you're into Egypt, Rome, Greek, whatever, it doesn't matter. You find a situation to where all of these dates for all of these events are sitting there waiting for you, and they are made to sound as if they have already all been figured out, they have all been corroborated, these are set in stone, and there is no other possible date that could ever exist for any of these events that supposedly took place. So when somebody goes and they start to learn history, what are they faced with? Well, they're faced with a situation to where history is essentially a solved problem. Right? That is the way the mainstream presents history. They present it in a way that it's like, hey, look, we've got it all figured out. If everybody in the past few hundred years, or I guess you could argue the past few thousand years, we've kept and created a perfect worldwide chronology, and we've carried it on throughout the generations, and here it is. And now we have it all digitized. So, of course, in our enlightened time period, we know everything. And here's all the dates for you. Here's all the events. So when you start to learn a subject, and it does not matter the subject, you already have a ton of dates sitting there waiting for you that you are going to be expected to memorize. The mainstream expects you to believe all of this immediately, and of course we all do, right? At least in the Western world. I'm just talking about a Western perspective, by the way. I'm not talking about, other cultures maybe somewhere that have not been affected by the Western mind virus. So I only say that because there are exceptions. However, the vast majority of the planet at this point in time really does take a Western mindset when it comes to understanding our history. Even more interesting, when you go and you start learning about other cultures' histories, one of the things you will find is you will see academicians showing up in these areas in the world and actually telling the people who live there their quote-unquote real history. So, for example, a fantastic example of this horrific situation would be the quote-unquote Mongol Empire. I know, I keep using quotes, shut up. But the Mongol Empire, right? Western academicians show up in Mongolia and they say, oh, hey, your ancestors used to be really powerful and they conquered a huge chunk of Asia. And all of the local Mongolians were like, what? What are you talking about? What, really? What? Not a single one of them had any idea what Western academicians were talking about. And I am talking about true Mongolians, like in the purest sense of the word, all right? I know people will try to argue with me on this, and I can slap you around for that. That's not hard. Anyways, the point is that, for example, Mongolians had no clue whatsoever that there was a guy named Genghis Khan who ran around conquering the world. Right? They had no idea. They had no clue about their history until Western people showed up and told them that that is what happened. What this means is that the local people had no clue about a history that supposedly happened that was supposed to be immense and great and amazing. It's weird. And to talk even more on that point, if you're wondering about that and you haven't heard about it before, think about this. Right? What kind of a country is Mongolia now? And I don't mean any disrespect, but there is not a single country on this planet that fears Mongolia. Nobody is worried about Mongolians rising up and conquering. Nobody worried about that back in the day either, because the Mongolians didn't do that. They never did that. That culture never did anything like that. Western academicians told them they did that because Western academicians already had a pre-described or pre-created history that they already believed in, and this was part of that history. So the Mongolians, the local Mongolians in that area, had to learn their history from the West. That's how that happened. That's insane, right? But that's what happened. That's what went down. That is where this entire Mongolian empire, for example, came from. Now, there really was a Mongolian quote-unquote situation, but it is nothing like what the mainstream says. Nothing at all. It's a completely different situation made up of completely different cultures and people. And of course, those people right now are trying to be erased. Or right now the mainstream is attempting to erase the people who actually took part in those events. All right, now I'm just using that as an example. I'm not going to go further with that. But you get my point. All right, so this is common, by the way. This happens everywhere. All right, a lot of cultures, when they come in contact with the West, suddenly they learn their history from the West. Right? Their original old history is thrown out. It's thrown into the garbage. For example, India. India is another fantastic area where that happened, right? Where Western scholars came down there and started telling them about their history, right? That whole situation gets crazy as well. Okay. Anyways, my point is that right now we have a situation with respect to mainstream chronology to where we have this entire supposed timeline set up by the mainstream. And it's apparently perfectly accurate. There's no problems with it. Because if you're a historian or you're a new historian and you get into any of these kinds of areas, you're not allowed to change any of these dates. You are not allowed to jump in and make any new discoveries that could change any of the dates that are currently being printed in any of the textbooks. And there's a few reasons why this is the case. Right, the first reason is because nobody wants to change the textbooks. There's a lot of money in the textbooks lobby, isn't there? The textbook lobby, I don't know about nowadays, but it used to be one of the largest lobbies in America. Okay, why does that matter? Well, think about it. If you can control the textbooks, you can control what children are learning throughout their lives, and you can control the history that they will ultimately believe in. So if you can have children growing up with a false history lodged in their brains, and when they become adults and they are faced with any possibility of truth, they have been pre-programmed, or they will have been pre-programmed to immediately discard the actual truth in favor of what they were taught as they grew up. Right? Because that's the formative years of a child. Or that's the formative years of a human is when you're a child. Right? Your brain is still forming. It is physically being molded. It's still physically being molded right now. But when you're a kid, it's hyperplastic. So all of that information is being lodged into your brain, and then it's harder to get rid of it as you become an adult. So we run into an issue when we start looking at history objectively, and we start to do things like questioning some of the methodologies that historians use, mainstream historians currently use, to get the dates that they claim are real dates. Now, one of the methodologies the mainstream historians rely on nowadays is something called numismatics. Now, numismatics is simply the study of ancient coins, or maybe just general coins in general. Shut up. It's the study of ancient coins, right? Numismatics, a numismatist is somebody who takes ancient coins, and they're supposed to be a pro at looking at that coin and being able to tell you when that coin was minted, what empire it belonged to, who it belonged to, et cetera, et cetera. Now, what has happened over the centuries of numismatics being used to create dates that mainstream chronologists or historians, I won't even call them chronologists because they're not chronologists, mainstream historians will use numismatics to support whatever date they currently need it to support to keep their history in line. Now, this might sound like not a problem. I mean, on the surface, this makes sense. You think, oh yeah, well, I mean, why not use coins to date history? I mean, if we look at our coins nowadays, right? If you pull out a quarter or wherever you live and you look at your coinage, there's probably a date on that coin. So, that's helpful. Like if I pull out a quarter and it says 1973, okay, great. That quarter is a certain age, and I can use that quarter to date something. In that situation, I could look at the artwork, for example, and I could say, oh yeah, hey, look, in 1973, this is the kind of artwork they were using during that period of time, and you can potentially correlate that to other aspects of that time period relative to that coin to get an idea of what was going on with respect to other pieces of art, etc. And then you could possibly not only date the coin, but then you could possibly date, say, artistic methodologies. And of course, you can take this even further, and you can go and you can look at how the coin was minted. You can go and look at the intricacies in that, and that can help you get an idea of the technological level of the society during that period of time that coin was minted in. So, on the surface, numismatists, it sounds like a good idea, right? The study of coins seems like a dead ringer for something that we could use to understand history and something that we could date history with. The problem is that is completely false. We can do that right now with modern coinage. We can do that right now. Because for the past, let's say, century and a half or so, I'll even give you 2 centuries, we've had essentially a semi-established chronology, right? We've been using the AD time frame to establish when dates have been going on for at least the past couple of centuries. Now, the reason why I don't want to throw it back any further than a couple of centuries is because people don't understand how relatively new our dating system currently is. Our current dating system, right? We're right now in 2025. This is a new situation. Only a few centuries ago, and even right now, even this second, there are still other dating methodologies being used all over this planet, all over the world. There are still cultures that do not use this dating system. There are still cultures that use a 360-day calendar. That still exists. What that means is that 2025 is meaningless to those cultures. That is a Western situation. And even in the West, this dating methodology taking over is a new situation as well. This has not been going on that long. There have, before any kind of real centralization, before any kind of real technology started to spread information, and I don't mean the internet, I mean things like, the printing press, stuff like that. Before all of that was taking into effect, there was no reason for people who lived far apart to have the same dating methodology. Everybody had their own ways of dating things. They may have started their years off on the day that, the corn farm was coming in, or the corn crop was blooming that year, or whatever. Blooming. Does corn bloom? I don't think corn blooms. You know what I'm saying, right? They might start their calendar year in the middle of the summer because they can, right? There's no law whatsoever that says we have to start the year the way we start it now. Right, Chinese New Year doesn't follow the AD BC time frame, does it? No, they have their own situation. They start their year in a completely different time period. Right? Everybody has their own situation because that is what humans did only a few centuries ago all over the planet. Right? This entire dating situation is a new phenomena. People need to realize that. People need to understand that. I know I'm screaming at you, but it's something that people don't understand. Your average person nowadays, your average modern historian, whether you be a mainstream person or an alternative person, most people really do believe that this dating methodology has been set in stone for thousands of years. Everybody used it. Right? Most people have no idea about the Gregorian calendar. Most people have no clue how the Chinese calendar works. Most people have no idea why the Mayan calendar worked the way the Mayan calendar did. Right? They don't even think about it. Right? If they think about it longer than 2 seconds, they just immediately think that those people are stupid and that their calendars are wrong for whatever stupid reason, right? They're monkeys or whatever. Nobody really wants to admit that our dating system is brand new. Now, here's where the problem with numismatics comes into play. Because the current dating system that we employ today is new, what that means is that if you have a supposed coin from, let's say, ancient Rome, right? I don't know, 300 AD. Let's say you have a coin that's supposedly from 300 AD. How the hell do you know that that coin is from 300 AD? How do you know this? It's not going to say 300 AD on that coin. It's not happening, right? Different Roman areas and parts of the empire, they had their own dating systems. They did. I mean, that's just a fact. There's no way around that either. They were not using our current dating system. They didn't do that. So what dating system did they use? Well, this is where things get crazy. All right? Because right now, of course, we have several ancient Roman empires that supposedly existed. And of course, for some weird magical reason, mainstream historians can date these coins no problem. Now, right now, if you're wondering why this is an issue at all, let me throw up a couple of other problems. All right. So first of all, if you get an ancient coin, a supposed ancient coin, you are not going to have a dating methodology that matches what we use today. Okay, you're not going to find that, right? It's not going to say 300 AD relative to 2025 today. It's not going to have that. It's going to have its own dating methodology. So you have to decode that, and you have to decode that versus what we use today. How do you take a dating system that we have no actual way of truly calibrating, and how do you put that up against our current dating system and come up with a valid date? How do you do that? You can't, right? And nobody, mainstream historians say they do it, but there's no way they can do it. It's impossible, right? And we're going to cover several of the reasons why this isn't working, but how do you do that? How do they do that? Show me the true scientific methodology that is 100% proven with all of the evidence that follows the scientific method and can be reproduced. Show me how you got that year perfectly on that Roman coin. Doesn't exist. There's no such thing. Nobody can show that to me. What will happen is they'll start fumbling over themselves when I truly ask for their real scientific methodology and their true 100% scientific evidence that proves it beyond a shadow of a doubt. Once I demand that, and you should always demand that, demand nothing less. Why would you demand anything less? If somebody is going to make a claim like that, if you're going to tell me that there's some Roman Empire that lived, 1800 years ago and they were making all of these coins and all of these events were happening, you better have proof. You better have scientific proof. Because if you are going to say that events happened in the past that technically do affect now, right? Right now, people are benefiting off of these histories. We have an entire church structure that is benefiting off of this history, right? It is. There's no way around it, right? The Vatican is benefiting off of this supposed history. If somebody is going to benefit at that level, you better have the real scientific evidence to support the claim. Numismatists have none of this. Now, this might sound like a shock to a lot of people, but let's go over it and let me explain to you why the concept of numismatics is ultimately stupid and completely unreliable. Now, I know this sounds harsh. I get that. But I'm at the point where I don't care anymore. Because right now, history is being rewritten and destroyed right in front of us. And people using a concept like numismatics are one of the issues doing this. This is one of the culprits that is destroying history. So let's start at the basics, and then we'll work our way up. And what I want to do is let's see if we can't just get you to come to the conclusion on your own, right? That would be the best, right? Let me just see if I can tickle your critical thinking skills and have you just prove it to yourself that using numismatics to prove history is beyond ridiculous. We don't have it. It's not there. All right, okay. So if we find a supposed Roman Empire coin, your average person right now honestly believes that we know exactly where that coin comes from because of several reasons. And not just where it comes from, but the period, et cetera, et cetera. Really, your average person believes that this is a solved problem, that there is nothing else to do with this. Like, numismatics is done. We're finished. You get a coin, you know exactly from what period it was, and you go from there. Right? It's perfect. It's no problem. It's a great way to date things. Right? Nothing could be further from the truth. Right. So let's look at this. You find a coin. Right? You find a coin that looks Roman. Okay. All right. How do you prove that it's Roman? What do you do? What's the first thing you do? Well, I take it to a coin person. I take it to a numismatist. The numismatist will take your coin and they'll look at it and they'll compare it against a bunch of other coins. They have a giant library of coins that they will go and look through, and they will be like, well, yeah, I think that's 250 AD, Roman Empire, whatever. And they'll say that because they already have a predetermined answer in their little catalog library that supposedly already has all of this stuff figured out. Now, let's stop for a second and look at what just happened. A numismatist will tell you a date and a time period and a time frame, or time period probably, of where that coin came from. And then your average person will walk away smiling, thinking, oh yeah, great, I have a Roman coin from 250 AD. Some expert told me about it, so it must be real. Fantastic. There's a problem with that right off the bat. Scientifically speaking, what happened there? Nothing happened there, scientifically speaking. Absolutely no science was performed whatsoever on that coin. So let's go ahead and perform just a little bit of science on this coin, and let's see if that numismatist is warranted in giving any kind of an answer whatsoever, other than, I have no idea, bro, go somewhere else because we don't know what the hell we're talking about. Because that's the only answer they should have given that person, or us in this case, when we have a coin. Okay. When we bring a coin to a numismatist, what we should be expecting is science, because that's what we need. Right? We want science. I don't care about what you think, right? I don't care if you think a coin is from a particular era, and we'll get into their little library catalog thing in a second as well and destroy that. I don't care what you think. I want to know for a fact when this coin was made. Tell me, how do you do that? Well, your average person will first say, well, just date it. Don't we have some kind of, tri-quarter scientific dating method that we can scan the coin and it will tell us, when the coin was made? No, we have nothing like that. We have nothing like that. There is no magical way of dating a coin. It is impossible. Impossible. Okay, there's no such thing. A lot of people don't realize that. If I have a coin, I have no real methodology of dating that coin whatsoever. None. Zero, zilch, nada. There is no real scientific way of dating that coin. Right? I have nothing to scan. You say, well, what about radiometric dating? What about it? Right? I need biological material to do radiometric dating. Right? It's not going to work on a coin. That's why we can't date ruins either. You cannot date metal. You cannot date stone. It doesn't work. So, okay, great. So that entire dating methodology goes out the window. So what the hell are these numismatists doing that they suddenly have this date that they can tell us about a coin if they can't even do something really scientific like any kind of radiometric dating? What else do they have? So they can't do that. So how else could we possibly date the coin? Well, here, let's help out the numismatist. And this will outline even more of the problem as we help the numismatist. Let's say we found this coin, 10 feet underground. We actually found it in a quote-unquote cultural layer, right? 10 feet underground in this area. The numismatist is not going to have any scientific experimentation to do once he has that information. Now what he's going to do is he's going to go to another catalog. He's going to go to the stratigraphy that has already been predetermined by mainstream. And he is going to say, oh yeah, 10 feet down in this area, oh yeah, it must be 375 AD, because Professor Shlomo over there said so. So that's the date for your coin. And once again, a lot of people are fine with that. Oh yeah, the consensus says that if you find a coin 10 feet underground during this period of time, oh, it must be real and it must be from that date. Right? That's it, and people will walk away. Also completely unscientific. Why is that unscientific? Well, the next question we need to ask is, where the hell are these catalogs coming from? right? I mean, if we're going to trust the catalogs, these catalogs must have some kind of science embedded in them, right? I mean, smart people work on this. We have smart academicians who get paid six figures to create these chronologies. They must know what they're doing, right? Right? They must know. You would think they would know, and most people believe they do. They have no idea. They have no clue. These catalogs are generated by other garbage dating methodologies that calibrate off of other garbage dating methodologies. Let me give you an example really quick. So one of the things a numismatist will do is they will attempt to use cultural layers to date that coin. Okay, so where did the dates for those cultural layers come from? Well, archaeologists are over there digging around, and they start looking and digging around stuff up, and they find things, and they say, well, we're finding things 10 feet under the ground. How do we date this? Now, one of the things they might try to do is some radiometric dating, but radiometric dating is absolute garbage. It is unreliable regardless. That's a scientific fact. So we have to throw that out, but they will use it. However, the archaeologist will keep any radiometric date that they get that they like. That is how dating works for stratigraphy. Archaeologists will never tell you all of the other dates that they got from their tests. They will only tell you the date that fits what they are expecting to find, because they are expecting a date. Especially nowadays, because your modern archaeologists, they've already been preconditioned with the chronology. Your modern day archaeologist is not digging in the dirt hoping to completely change the history. Right? They'll get fired. They'll lose their funding. They are not going to change anything. When they find an artifact, a coin, let's say, in this example, at a certain depth in a cultural layer, they are simply going to go to that same damn catalog and say, oh yeah, that must be 375 AD, because that's what the catalog says. That's what they have to do, and they have to do that. So now you're asking, well, what about the radiometric dating? Yeah, what about it? So they go and let's just say there's a patina or something on the coin. Or maybe they found some kind of biological crap that they could, around in that layer that maybe they could try to date as well, right? Let's give them that as well. So they grab that material and they have it radiometrically dated. What happens? Well, the dates are going to come back all over the place. And this is generally what happens. They're not going to get, they very rarely ever get the date they want, first of all, right? There's always an error margin anyways, right? And of course, they don't really tell you the error margin either. It's ridiculous. But they'll get dates from all over the map. They'll get 10,000, 100,000, 70,000, 2,000. They'll get dates all over the place. What they will do is they will select the date that is the closest date to what they were expecting, and then that is the date they will publish. What they will not tell you is they will not tell you that 10,000-year-old date. They will not tell you the 5,000-year-old date. They will not tell you the really weird date of 100,000 years. They're not going to tell you those dates. They're not even going to throw that in a footnote. Now, what happens if they don't get the date they don't want? They don't say anything. They just don't put it in the paper. They just use the catalog that's already predetermined for them to date the item. Right? You only get the dates when the dates line up with what they want. So where the hell is this catalog coming from? I mean, what is this thing? We have this magic catalog that has all of these pre-described dates, these predetermined dates that mainstream historians and archaeologists can reference. Where the hell did all of this stuff come from? Well, ironically enough, some of this information was actually proven by a numismatist, right? And there's a couple other things as well, which is funny, we'll get to in a sec. But just to show you how circular this trash is what they will do is that they will find a coin buried 10 feet down. They'll give it to a numismatist. The numismatist, who's apparently some kind of crazy magical expert, will ascribe a date to it. And of course, because he's accredited by whatever university exists at the time, he has to be right. So what his determination is will now go into the catalog as a fact, right? No science was done. No kind of information was, no real conclusion was made in any kind of a scientific way. It's just what he said. Well, how did he say what he said? I mean, why would he say what he said? Why would you give a date? I mean, did he just give a random date? Or what happened? No, what that guy did is he went and he started to look at these supposed works and literature that has been copied, and recopied from the time period. He read those and tried to determine when that coin relative to those literary works may have existed. For example, he would have been trying to correlate perhaps a ruler on the face of that coin to some ruler back in the past. And he would have been using all of that literature. He would have been using those tomes. So he goes through that stuff and he says, well, this tome apparently seems to really say that this coin really should have existed around 375. So my professional opinion is 375 AD. Here you go. If you found this coin 10 feet down, then that means that your layer is 375 AD, which then means everything else you find in that layer will also be dated to 375 AD. There was no science done to make that assumption, but what has happened is that you find yourself in a circular dating logic to where everybody is calibrating each other. This is why this stuff does not work. Numismatics is a joke. We can't use it, but let's keep going. It gets funnier from here. So let's go back to our example. We brought a coin in and we want to know when the hell, what date is this? When was this coin made? So another scientific thing that you would think you would be able to do is you would be able to look at the metallurgy, right? I mean, the metallurgy really should tell us something. And yes, it does tell us something, right? It can tell us a couple of things. The first thing it can do is that it can potentially, it's not guaranteed, but it can potentially tell us where the metal on the planet came from. All right. Now it's not 100% guaranteed, like I said, but it is a route that can be found, and that's awesome. Because if we can trace where the metal came from, hey, at least we have a geographic location. That's something. But if I tell you that an event took place at a geographical location and I end my sentence there, do you know when it took place? No, you have no idea. So let's start with the metallurgy thing, for example. So, okay, fine. The numismatist, he's not just going to date it with a catalog. He's like, you know what? Let me clip that coin and let's look at the metallurgy. Let's actually do a little science. And already that guy is a much better numismatist than like 99% of them. Okay, but nobody does this. All right, so you melt it down, you start looking at the configuration of the metal itself, right? You start looking at the atomic configuration, or molecular configuration. I guess you could kind of look at, okay, anyway, the molecular configuration of what makes up the metal. Okay. They look at that and they test that against another catalog of where all the metals that we found from all parts of the world are, and if we can match that up, great. That will tell us a geographical location. But it does not give us a date, right? We have no date. It doesn't matter, right? Great. It was mined out of the mountains in Italy, let's just say, because Rome is by Italy. Okay, fine. That's fantastic. And you're like, okay, well, I would expect that. I would expect a Roman coin to maybe come from Italy. Fantastic. Great. Okay. So that's something at least you think. But then, of course, if we apply critical thinking, we then have to ask some questions. So the first question that we have to ask is, all right, so it was mined in Italy. That's fine. But how do we know, A, when it was mined? Because we don't. So we can't even place a date on when it was mined. And B, how do we know that the metal in that coin was originally even for that coin? Let's have some fun. Let's give the numismatist a helping hand here. Let's say that we actually go ahead and we compare the composition of what we discover from the metallurgy tests and through a lot of trial and error and maybe kind of trying to line stuff up. Well, with the historical catalog, we are eventually able to settle on a mainstream date on when that metal may have been mined. Let's just say we get to that point. There's about 1 million problems with that because, of course, as we all now know, all of the literature that was ever created was created essentially during the Middle Ages, and a lot of that stuff is forgeries, copies, etc., and manipulated garbage. Anyway, let's just, okay, fine. So for mainstream purposes, we come to a conclusion that the metal was mined, let's say 300 AD, just for fun, whatever. Okay. The metal came from this mine in 300 AD. All right. We still have some problems Because now we have to ask ourselves, okay, it came out of the area, but was it minted into a coin during that period of time? Like, do we have proof that the metal that was mined at that point in time, right, went straight from the mine into the coinage? Do we have that kind of evidence? And of course, the answer is no. We have no. What do they call? What the detectives call it? The chain of evidence, I believe, is what they call it. Anyway, we have no chain of evidence that proves, for example, that metal was mined from that mine and went immediately into the coinage that would then have been dated, 375 AD. We have no paperwork. We have no reason to believe that is how that went down. We have no reason, basically, was what I'm saying, to believe that the metal that is in that coin is truly minted in 375 AD. It is entirely possible that metal was mined out of the mine, then made into, say, a sword, and then that sword lasted for 100 years, past our 375 AD date, and then was melted down again and made into a hammer, and then was melted down again and made into a counterfeit coin. Or was melted down again and made into a real coin that was then misdated back in time to an old coin. Do you see the level of confusion that we start to get into when we look at numismatics? Right? Just trying to do the metallurgy, it's impossible. We do not possess the scientific evidence to prove any of that stuff. It's not there. We don't have the historical evidence to corroborate it, and we certainly do not have the scientific evidence to corroborate any of the basic dates that are ascribed to your mainstream coinage nowadays. It's just not there. Another thing I just said right there, think about this. What about forgeries? Right? This, in fact, it's funny. It's funny. I guess I could have started and ended this entire talk or rant or whatever the hell this is within like 3 minutes, because I could have just said, and all numismatists know this, that the problem of forgeries within that community is legendary. A lot of people don't realize this, but forged coins are a serious problem for historians. It's huge. Right? And the forgeries, they've been going on for a while. Right? Forgeries didn't just start, let's say, a century ago. Humans have been forging money forever. As long as money has existed, humans have gone out of their way to try to find ways to counterfeit it. Haven't they? Yeah. Right? So it's entirely possible that the coin that we found, that we brought to that numismatist, it came from 1973. It could have come from some dude's shop who forged it so that he could sell it for $5 on eBay so that I could take it to the numismatist and be a douchebag and ask him what date it is so that he could lie to me and tell me that he knows what he's talking about. That's the situation we run into. How do you know what a real coin is versus a forgery? And the reality is we don't. This is the truth that a good numismatist will own up to. A good numismatist will tell you straight up, there are so many forgeries right now. Right? They're just millions. I mean, they're countless. There are so many forgeries that it's essentially, technically, scientifically impossible to truly state what coins are real and what coins are potentially fake. This problem is huge, and it's funny because it gets even larger when you really do start to think about all of the forgeries that would have been taking place in the past, few centuries alone. And it gets even worse if you believe in the mainstream chronology. Because now you have 2,000 plus years of potential forgeries gumming up the entire situation. Because counterfeiting has been going on as long as there has been money to counterfeit. So if you believe in the mainstream chronology, and you ignore real chronology, you have to deal with 2,000 plus years of potential counterfeit money. How do you know what is real and what is not? How do you know that a counterfeited coin made in 375 AD is not a real coin made in 375 AD? How do you know that? Seriously, show me. Show me the science on how you know the difference. You can't. There's nobody on this planet who can do it, and anybody who says they can, choke them out. Just get rid of them, because they're lying. We have no clue. Now, of course, it gets even worse for those people because there's not that much history anyways that coinage like that existed. But the main point is that when a numismatist tells you these dates, they act as if they have all of this scientific knowledge waiting for you. They have none of it. They can't substantiate any of it. It does not exist. So when we find a situation to where somebody says, oh yeah, this coin shows Caesar and blah, blah, shut up, dude. You don't know. You have no idea. Even funnier with coins is that these guys will date coins that are barely even, you can barely make out stuff on the coin. And they have no problem telling you exactly what emperor is on the coin. No problem whatsoever. Oh, and by the way, it's a real coin. Right? How do they know that? They don't. And that actually brings us to the other problem. How do you know what picture of what emperor is who? Now, on the coins, you will find inscribed emperor names. Like you will find Caesar. How do you know which Caesar they're talking about half the time? You don't. You'll also find situations to where you don't have a name on the coin. Right? There are plenty of times to where the coins are just in such a bad condition to where you can't read them. They're not legible. So all you have is a vague outline of a person. Numismatists have no problem telling us what emperor is on that coin from that crappy profile on that coin. How are they doing this? How are they doing this? Nobody questions this, but it gets even funnier because nobody actually knows what any of these emperors even look like. You cannot take a coin and then we don't have a picture of any of the Caesars. Like I can't go online and get an actual selfie of Caesar to test against what's on the coin. I can't do that. It doesn't exist. There's no such thing. You cannot tell me by looking at the profile of a ruler who the hell he is because we don't know. We just don't know. It's not there. You cannot do that. We do not have that level of information. It does not exist. Okay, it's not there. Now, a lot of other people might shoot back and say, but we have all of these books that say all of these things, right? Tacitus and all of, Gregorius and blah, blah, blah. All of these guys, they've created these whole histories for us. And all we have to do is match the coin to the history. Oh, well, here's our other problem, right? Because this is one of the things that numismatists do to solidify a date. They are trusting in books like Tacitus. They are trusting that Gregorius is not lying to us. They are trusting that all of these books that magically appear during the Middle Ages are not forgeries, are not lies, are not pure fiction. They believe these books 100%. And so does all of mainstream, by the way. Right? Mainstream historians believe this stuff as well. And it's ironic because mainstream historians will even admit that at least half of Tacitus's garbage is wrong and forged. Right? It's all garbage. It's fictional. Even they will admit that, but they have no problem using the other half of Tacitus. No problem. It's fine. Just use the other half. Surely that's the real stuff. Surely that's not lying to us. And they will try to line up the coinage with these books. And of course, they believe the books are real because, they're just copies. We don't have the originals anymore. And nobody ever has the originals, by the way. Right? Nobody ever sees the originals. The originals always magically disappear. And this doesn't bother a numismatist. Doesn't phase them at all. They're like, no, it's fine. All we have to do is test our coinage against these books, and that gives us a date, and we're done. It's ridiculous. When we look at something like trying to use coins to get dates for historical dates, it does not work. Right now, we have ungodly amounts of history that have been supposedly corroborated on numismatics. Right? It's all over the place. just from what I've talked about, and I'm just ranting and yelling at everybody, just this little bit proves, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that you cannot trust coinage. You cannot look at a coin and think that you have a solid date. It's not scientifically possible. We do not have that kind of information. It doesn't exist. It's not there. It doesn't matter what anybody says. It's not there. Okay? You have to show me all the science to prove me wrong. It doesn't exist. Right? And it never will exist. It's never going to exist because we don't know. It's gone. Oh, this stuff, there's no way of digging some of this stuff up ever again. It's gone. It's out of here. It's history has eaten it alive. So whenever you see something being dated by a coin, and like I said, there's all kinds of garbage that is corroborated by coinage, you better be skeptical because that is not real history. That is the history that people are being forced to teach and that they think is real only because they have been told that it is real. There is no scientific evidence that proves numismatics is right. There is no scientific evidence at all that substantiates any of these claims. What this means then is that we can discard those dates. If you discard those dates, what happens? Well, a lot of history that we all take for granted, not we, those in the mainstream take for granted, starts to fall apart. It starts to crumble. It starts to go away because now one of your pillars, one of your major pillars that supports the mainstream chronology, that supports the mainstream narrative, it crumbles. It turns to dust. I know people don't want to hear this. I get that. Okay, but science doesn't care about our feelings. Facts, reality does not care about our feelings. There's no way around that. So if you have a pet theory right now, and you think your dating systems are right, and you are using any kind of numismatics, any kind of mainstream dating at all, if I'm honest, you have to reevaluate. Just stop right now and go ask basic questions about the evidence that you are using, the chronological evidence, at least for this show, with respect to this show. Go question that stuff. Where are these people getting these dates for these coins? How do they know this? How are they getting around the forgery and counterfeit problem? How are they getting around the dating situations now that we know that if you are going to try and date something using any of the tomes that were discovered magically in the Middle Ages, they can't be real. What is this? How is this even allowed? How are we basing dates off of this? Right? These are real questions that need to be asked while you do your research, and there's no way around it. Yeah, I know it sucks, and I know it might get rid of some of your stuff, but that's okay. Remember, it's not necessarily about proving your theory. If you can prove your theory by disproving your theory or by attempting to disprove your theory, that's the way you want to go. If your theory cannot stand up against scientific scrutiny, for example, if you're using numismatics in any of your work, right? You have a problem. You have a scientific problem. And that's, okay, I know. I'm being harsh. I know. Okay. That's the basic of numismatics, right? Numismatics, it's no offense to the numismatists. I get it. It's a cool hobby, blah, blah, blah. But when we have these people making these kind of solid decisions that are then giving credence to, a trash mainstream history, but ultimately they are giving credence to power structures that are illegitimate. This is bad. This is objectively bad. It's not just bad for historians. It's not just bad for science. It is bad for society. It is literally one of the things that is tearing apart his society. Did you ever think that numismatics was tearing apart society? Did you ever think that this was one of the horrible things going on? Yeah, probably not. But it's the truth. It's the truth. This is the kind of fallacious stuff that is used against the people. You, me, everybody, not in power. These people use these dates to maintain control, and they use it to maintain control not just over modern society right now. They use it to maintain control over history as well. If you do not know your history, you have no connection to who you are. If you have no connection to who you actually are, then you are living in a disassociative state. If you live in a disassociative state, you can be you can be mind controlled. I'll just use the term. You can literally be manipulated to do whatever the hell people want you to do. And that is what is happening. So when you look at coins, don't forget, we have no reason to believe any of these dates. None, zero, nada, zilch. They do not exist. There's no reason. Okay, I'm done. You get the point. So just ask those questions. Don't blindly believe in whatever mainstream history says just because it sounds great and scientific. Numismatics, there's no science there. There's no reason to believe it. We'll do an in-depth show on this where I'm not screaming and yelling at you, and we'll go into even more of the problems because the entire situation is fascinating. And it really is like it's an entire other world that opens up to you once you start to truly realize how horribly you have been lied to. Once you start to see the tools that have been used against you, tools that should have been innocent. Right? The study of coins, you would think that that would be great, right? That sounds fantastic for historians. Yes, use coins to date things, but no, we cannot. But nobody tells you that. People have no problem citing the dumbest studies you can imagine to corroborate whatever stupid date they want in the mainstream, just so they can uphold the status quo. Numismatics does not work. We cannot use coinage to establish dates.